keep it alive through these lines I write. I keep it live cause I thrive. I might just blow your mind tonight. I'm so hyped, but it's no hype. From this height, it's direct hits on sight. I'm your type, lend me your ears to show you that there's something in me. I'm not giving up, I'm standing right here, holding these days hostage. And I'll make this my year. We turning fear into love, and the love's in the air. I love doing this cause nothing compares. Nothing can share that same type of feeling when you feeling them flares. They can't catch it, it's havoc. I rip to a tear, switch a scenario. My stereos, I leave them impaired. Variables start to change and they're all in my range. I just gotta grab it, it's all mathematics. Every step is drastic, I make it fantastic. I'm trying to take your breath away. Asthmatic.
This is live through the stereo. Go and let it blow, blow through the stereo. I'ma let them know through the stereo. Yo, here we go through the stereo, stereo. This is live through the stereo. Go and let it blow, blow through the stereo. I'ma let them know through the stereo. Yo, here we go through the stereo, stereo.
Yeah, just nod your head with it, so explicit and vivid. Every image is intricate, intimate. I put my all into it, no scrimmage and no rules. I'm a pro tool, hear my heartbeat, beat into the vocals. I'm so loco, lost my mind, oh no. It's ponderoso, dope, so no overdose, cause it's dope, yo. Man, this is house grown, mixed with some milestones. So I let the style flow down like the Dow Jones, bringing it with some foul tones, letting the crowd know we getting loud, so it's eardrum rudiments. Yeah, we bring it rude again. Move, little hooligan. Music for tuning in, full time to the 10. I'm on my clock like I told you. I'm doing this for dreams we pursuing.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Anti-Media Radio, once again with your host Nick Bernabe here on UCY.tv. Thank you for tuning in and welcome to the show. Also want to give a quick shout out to Ponder and XL, our awesome musicians that provide us the music for this show. I know some of the other shows are changing it up out there, but we're definitely going to hold on to our intro music because it's kind of grown on us. And make sure you guys check us out Monday through Friday and all the other awesome hosts on UCY. We're here at the same time every day of the week except for the weekend. And we're just trying to, we're trying to bring a different perspective to the news and hopefully give a more accurate view of what's really going on, because I think everybody knows that something is definitely not exactly right, and I think that's kind of show that's basically why we're here, is to show show everybody what's actually going on. Now we are joined on the call tonight with DB Schwartz, my co-host. How you doing tonight, man?
I'm doing good, Nick. I'm doing good. There's a lot of things going on, and things are starting to break open. Yet there's still no freaking, protests against all this torture stuff coming out now and all the blowback. I guess maybe something has to hit closer to home before people wake up.
Yeah, it's kind of sad, man. I mean, there was some pretty good torture, anti-torture protests a few weeks ago, but definitely it's not an issue that, widespread Americans want to oppose. But I think a lot of people, we went in depth on this last week or the week before about how, the torture is already here. People are being tortured every day in the U.S., in the prisons and jails. I mean, we're probably the biggest torturing nation in the world right now. And we're doing it to our own citizens. We're also joined on the call by with Manny. How you doing tonight, Manny?
What's up, Nick? How you doing, brother? Just putting more. We're getting ready to put more attention on the 43. In the state of Guerrero. We need to bring it up a notch so that people can never forget what's going on past these borders of the United States and all that. So I just want to. That's all I got to say as far as the show is concerned. Also want to say feliz cumpleaños, or feliz handicap in Espanol. Happy birthday to my brother D.D. Schwartz.
There's like so much stuff to talk about tonight, and I don't exactly know where to start. We have some awesome guests that are going to be on the show tonight as well. We're going to be joined by Justin King in a few minutes from the Anti-Media. He also has a new website called The Fifth Column. You guys have probably already seen it. It's already going pretty viral, which is awesome. And then we're also going to be joined by Baron Himes from whatthefreally.com, and we're going to go over some foreign policy stuff towards the end of the show. And also to take note of, we're going to try to have Derek Bros on the program on Wednesday night. We have this article that's we put up on the Anti-Media just earlier today, basically about geoengineering. And there's a scientist from Rutgers University by the name of Alan Robach, and he's basically concerned that the CIA is funding a lot of this geoengineering research, and he's worried that they're going to weaponize it and use it for offensive purposes. So we're going to get into that stuff in depth on Wednesday. But also what's going on, something really important for us here at the Anti-Media is this whole situation with Patty Beers, and we had her on the program on our last show on Wednesday. And if you guys were tuning in, you probably already know, but she's basically may be facing some jail time up to 6 months. And we're going to be going up to Fullerton on this coming Monday, on the 23rd. And Cassius is also going to be in town, which is one of our longtime journalists. And he's probably going to go up with us on Monday to Fullerton. So we'll probably be doing the show from location on Monday night. So those are some of the things that we have going on over here before we jump into all this news.
And this is just the first phase, Nick, because remember, they're passing laws now that are going to make it a punishable crime with jail sentences for what you post online.
Yeah, there was a article about a guy that was a cop was threatening to arrest him for arguing on Facebook, basically for arguing with him on Facebook. And I mean, look at all these guys that have recently been arrested and charged for linking or just showing information. Some of these guys are literally just hyperlinking, and then they're going to jail. And then of course we have the bigger whistleblowers like Snowden and Chelsea Manning. But
let's not forget Hastings.
Yeah, and then Hastings, of course. But yeah, there's definitely a war on journalism going on. So we're going to go out there on Monday and we're going to stand up for, freedom of speech, freedom of the press. I mean, if that means anything anymore. I mean, of course, we're still able to operate, so there is still a remnant of what's left of freedom of speech. But it's important to fight for it, and people take it for granted, and people don't exercise it enough. I think very, very much so. Rights are like muscles, you got to keep exercising them, otherwise you forget that you have them.
Yeah. Hey, Nick, on that deal on Friday, I was glad to mention PM Beers because I think people should know about what's happening with the journalists. Also, I was very moved that the reporter wanted to know what happened to the guy in Washington State, but I also let him know what happened to the young kid that was shot in the back, in Los Angeles and stuff like that. And it just really blows me away, when things are happening. But I told the reporter in Spanish about PM Beers. I said our journalists are just being targeted left and right, and stuff like that. So I was really emotional, and I know you were too, about those mothers, talking about what happened to their young people, And it's just, it was an emotional thing for me on Friday and stuff like that, So it just, and I'm glad you were there too and stuff like that, So, and DB, I hope you drank a nice shot for me, okay, on your birthday. So, okay, bye.
We're going to send DB some virtual tequila right now. Are you snowed in over there?
Okay.
Yeah, he's probably snowed in over there on the Minnesota, wherever he's at. Yeah, man, I really appreciate what you said on Friday. We had Kathy on the program on last Wednesday, and she was talking about this big event that we had here Friday for the 200 people that have had their lives taken by San Diego law enforcement, and a few of some of the mothers of victims that were killed by police were there. They were there at the protests, and they gave a few speeches, and it was really, really sad to hear these mothers speak about what happened to their children because of the cops. But Manny, I really appreciate what you said for Patty, and to put the word out there, because this is a war. It's war on freedom, and anybody that's going to be exposing the machine, the state, they're going to be under either surveillance or bully tactics or they'll have their rights revoked. We heard about that journalism law that Feinstein was trying to push through, where she was trying to basically decimate citizen journalism and stuff like that, and anybody that wasn't paid to write wouldn't be considered a legitimate journalist. But I'd argue that everyone's a journalist. Everybody, especially now with social media, everybody can post stuff and anybody can break the news. I mean, anyone can read. Like the Eric Garner video was just recorded by a guy that was happened to be standing right there. And Kathy actually mentioned this on Wednesday. That guy ended up getting indicted for something else, and the cops that killed Eric Garner didn't. And that's just it just shows you how messed up the system is, the justice system, supposed justice system is. We might as well go into this police state stuff because there's been a few stories recently that are cause for concern. I really thought we were making progress in the police brutality sector, but I guess some cops are starting to rethink the way they do things, and some cops aren't. We have this cop that was that just killed a guy in Miami Gardens down in Florida, and it was a 25-year-old schizophrenic man. His mom called the cops to help get her kid under control because he was acting erratically, and keep in mind he had schizophrenia. And then the cops show up and shoot the guy, and it turns out that the only thing he was supposedly armed with was a broom. So the cops couldn't detain this guy or taser him or anything, even though all he had was a broom. They shot him dead.
At what point does a weapon become more deadly to a police officer than him shooting the assailant? I mean, if the person doesn't have a gun or, let's say, throwing stars, how are you going to get to a cop? It's just ridiculous. It's like the guy throwing rocks that gets shot in the back.
Yeah, so, that's the other crazy story is the guy that was supposedly throwing rocks at the cops, and I think this one was up in Washington State, and it was a Mexican guy, and he was, he was in some kind of confrontation with the cops, and he threw a rock, and then, someone was taking cell phone video, and it clearly shows that the guy was, retreating, running away. He had his back turned.
Away with his hands up, back turned, and he was throwing rocks at cars. I mean, this is another mentally ill guy. You shoot him in the face with a beanbag and arrest him.
Yeah, and we've talked about this before, taking the lethal force away from the cops, the regular cops, and people like to say, oh, no, that's impossible, but, it's not impossible. Countries in Europe do that. A lot of countries in Europe, the cops don't have guns, they have non-lethal weapons, and they keep the peace,
Only SWAT have guns in the UK because why? They're 90% ex-military. They're very trained. And they've been in the heat of battle. They're not going to just shoot anybody for any arbitrary reason. And again, Nick, this goes back to training, and let's even put it out there, education, intelligence. I mean, we can link it to those two things. A smarter cop that's better trained doesn't kill people.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that. There was a study that came out. I posted it a few days ago. I actually tagged you in it because you've been saying that for a while, require the cops to have a college degree. But there was a study that came out that actually showed that cops that have college degrees are actually a lot less violent than the cops that don't. So, I mean, that's just another thing that we have to keep in mind. And, in the UK, they don't have the lethal police, but keep in mind the recent developments that have gone on over there in Europe as far as this whole Charlie Hebdo shooting, and then the overreaction, the martial law type situation went on in France. And then you remember there was that other story about how the British government was mobilizing, I think it was 10,000 troops to go out into the streets and supposedly keep the peace. So, things are changing in Europe too, and it's kind of scary. These guys, for the longest time, they didn't have these crazy violent cops, but it looks like a lot of the governments of Europe are starting to try to, increase the militarization of police in Europe as well. So it's especially with this Copenhagen shooting now too. The situation in Europe is getting really, it's getting really dangerous, and we're starting to see a lot of racism, a lot of fascist, tendencies starting to rise over there. And then we're also starting to see this whole militarization of the police, like we saw in the UK following the Charlie Hebdo shooting. And, it's a pretty dangerous prospect. But I do think that pushing for reforms as far as making the cops less lethal would be a good start to doing things. I think that, obviously the whole system needs an overhaul and needs to be rethought. But there are reforms that we can go about, sooner rather than later that could actually help. Now we are joined on the call. We do have a caller from 209. I just wanted to get your question in real quick here before we go to Justin. 209, how's it going? What do you want to talk about? Okay, maybe 209 doesn't want to talk. I'm going to have to drop your call because I'm getting a little feedback here. So we are joined on the line now by Justin King from the Anti-Media and the Fifth Column News, his new project. How's it going, Justin?
Pretty good. How are you doing?
Oh, not too bad. We're just getting through this police news that has been coming out this week. Of course, there's some more bad news that's breaking with this guy that was throwing rocks at cops up in Washington, and then the guy down in Florida that was shot with a broom in his hand. I mean, what do you think, man? What is it? I know in some of your articles you've gone in pretty in depth as far as, the reaction that the public is going to have to all this violence. And we saw that article you posted today about that huge graffiti piece that was put up in LA and caused quite the stir. So what do you think? What do you think is the future of this police accountability movement? What can we do to try to put a stop to this?
Well, there's nothing that the movement can do that it isn't already doing. It's going through petition, it's going through public outcry, it's using the media, it's holding peaceful demonstrations, and it's having large-scale civil disobedience and even riots. It is covering everything it can do. The problem is, due to a more militant mindset in the police, their response is to escalate. And historically, that always ends the same way. It ends with a bunch of civilians getting shot at a protest. So I hate to say it, but if I had to lay money on it, we're going to have that happen within the next 3 to 4 years. And that will probably be the tipping point where it goes one way or the other. Either the politicians will rein the police in, or the citizens will do it through other means.
The government is so cumbersome. We saw all these NSA Snowden leaks and stuff. We still haven't seen any reform at all to the NSA. And then we have Ferguson and Eric Garner and all these other people have been shot by police and all the protests. But still, we haven't really seen any big reforms. You know what I mean? So it just shows to me that the government is like really cumbersome. They don't reflect right away.
Justin, what do you think about finally getting these guys personally responsible when they screw up?
As far as getting them indicted, or are you talking about?
Like if they do something, say, without the benefit of a body cam on, then they're on their own.
All of this would be wonderful. The problem is we've got to get it through whatever government entity is in control of that department. And, the Fraternal Order of Police has a pretty big budget. They have a lot of pull. Fighting them is hard. So, we have tons of solutions. Getting a government body to implement it is something else. One of the things activists may want to look into is trying to choke off funding for the FOP. That, if there was a way to limit the amount of money they could spend on donating to candidates, that might be more effective than, normal protest. If they could, hold the protests at these fundraisers. Make it to where people don't want to go. Make it to where people don't want to give them money. Because that slush fund buys these politicians. They donate the money to, city councilmen or whatever, and these city councilmen are very reluctant to upset that cash cow.
I think you're right, and I think that you may be on the money there with this unfortunate future event that may happen. Because if you look at what Manny mentioned earlier in the show at the beginning there, a similar situation has recently gone on in Mexico where 43 students were basically disappeared by the government because they were organizing too effectively. And, Mexico is going through a pre-revolutionary stage right now where there's already autonomous regions breaking off from the country and, governing themselves and things like that. And that's really what I think the Mexican government is trying to clamp down on because they're really scared of that stuff. Because they can see that sooner or later it's going to turn into a big fight and maybe a revolution. So, that's exactly what happened in Mexico. They just decided, okay, well, these students are becoming way too effective. They're on the verge of breaking our state away from the whole country. So they just decided to make them disappear. And if you look at what's happened basically in Mexico since then, as you were saying, Justin, it's been a huge blowback where the people of the country and even here in the U.S. in places that have Mexican communities and even places that don't, people are up in arms about this stuff. And Manny mentioned it last week, I think, about the women taking up arms as well down in Mexico and taking the lead as well. It's caused a huge blowback, and unfortunately, that's probably what it's going to take, in the U.S. as well. One guy getting shot, or last year, what was it, over 1,000 guys that got shot by the police isn't enough. I guess they got to see a bunch of people get shot at once, and that's an unfortunate way of looking at things, but that could be the catalyst that really makes things happen.
Well, yeah, it's a media spectacle, and that's in the early 70s. There was a civil rights movement in Northern Ireland, and the Brits, the SAS, the RUC, these law enforcement and quasi-law enforcement agencies over there were doing horrible, horrible things to the people in this movement. Went on forever. Then all of a sudden, there was a march. Something happened. To this day, nobody really knows exactly what went down, but British paratroopers opened fire on the crowd. It's called Bloody Sunday is what it's known as. That incident changed everything. And people know the term IRA. The modern version of that came about and really grew because of that incident. That type of thing plays out over and over and over again. Americans are probably more familiar with the Boston Massacre. It's the same scenario. And I really do think that's where we're headed, because they've started arming, or patrolling. Like NYPD wanted to give M4s or machine guns, as the guy said, to people patrolling protests. That's like the worst idea in a long string of bad ideas. If they had done that, I would have said within a year. As soon as that becomes policy, where you've got rifles, automatic weapons, that these guys are issued that they're supposed to be patrolling these protests with, it's going to happen. And a rifle is different than a pistol in the sense that it's harder to control. It takes two hands. There's a lot less movement. And you don't have the less than lethal option. When you put them in a situation where law enforcement has only a lethal option that they're going to be able to use, and they're greeted with situations where non-lethal is what's appropriate, eventually somebody's going to screw up. I mean, it's just a matter of time. Now, NYPD did back off that, but somebody else will do it.
Yeah, thankfully the media pressure was able to get them to back off, and that's really our only hope now, because obviously it's not happening politically. But, I think that it's going to be a matter of when this activism or protesting, whatever you want to call it, when it gets to the point where it's so effective, where where armed protesters are literally occupying government buildings and not letting bureaucrats come in. That may be when we start seeing these kind of situations where the government forces literally start firing on people like it's Kent State. And it's unfortunate, but that will definitely be a waking moment in the media. And like you said, I think it can go either way, where, it could be framed up as, oh, look at these these American homegrown extremist terrorists that are trying to terrorize our government and stuff. Or it can be spun as, oh, look at these poor innocent kids that just got gunned down by the cops. And that's really up to, first of all, it's up to the activists to make sure that they're able to control their narrative, just like, Martin Luther King was a master at it. And we got to keep that stuff in mind. And then we also have to obviously keep pushing forward with our media initiatives. And I guess that's the next thing we should talk about, because this police state thing, we can talk about it forever, because there's just so much to talk about. But Justin, you just launched a new media outlet, and I'm not going to lie, I love the content you guys are posting. It's amazing. And you seem to have assembled some awesome journalists over there. But anyway, why don't you let our listeners know about that project and what you guys are doing?
It's the Fifth Column News. Basically, the whole idea is to find a way to get the reader of USA Today to read the anti-media. We want to be that bridge to get them from, state-run propaganda into a truly independent media. It's hard to make the jump from, the New York Times to anti-media, because it's so foreign. And those of us, I know I'm guilty of it. When we're writing for the anti-media, we know we're writing to people that know, our readers know what's really going on. So we skip over a lot of stuff that we might shouldn't, because new readers that see it, they kind of, they turn off immediately. So we want to be that bridge, and we want to focus heavily on investigative journalism and adversarial journalism. Anything that is going to kind of throw a monkey wrench into corporate propaganda or government propaganda, whether it be, in any country.
That's amazing. I like the idea. And yeah, I definitely understand that. I mean, the anti-media is very radical, and all of our listeners are pretty much, all of our readers and all of our listeners are pretty aware of, what's going on. So we can kind of get right to the bottom of things and straight up call Hillary Clinton a tool and call Jeb Bush a oligarch all in the same article,
Yeah.
Justin, could you explain where your terminology for Fifth Column comes from? Because I'm sure that's got a story to it.
Well, the Fifth Column, the original term was coined by a guy who was approaching a city. A general was approaching a city, and he said, I've got a column coming from the north, the south, the east, the west, and I already have a fifth column, and it's inside the city. And he actually convinced them to surrender the city without firing a shot. So it's synonymous with infiltration. And the funny thing is, he didn't actually have a fifth column, but there wasn't anybody in the city. But the name stuck, and the tactics stuck of slowly infiltrating and changing things from within without actually getting inside the government, because we know that doesn't work. The other meaning attributed to it is most daily papers have 4 columns on the main page, on their front page. The fifth column is, what gets left out, and that's something that we want to cover.
That's amazing, man. I like the name. I like the ideas, and I think it's definitely needed. We need a bridge between these regular people that don't really know exactly what's going on yet, and I don't think that I don't fault them for it. I mean, there's crazy amounts of propaganda going on that keep people in this, place where they're just completely brainwashed and not really thinking outside of what they're being fed by the TV media. But fortunately, I think the trend is going towards the internet media, the independent media, and obviously we're growing at the anti-media pretty quickly. And your site went viral as soon as it launched. People are definitely starting to become, hungry for this content, and they want to know what's going on that's not being talked about, and I think we have to have a way to get the people from the middle that are kind of just going with the flow over to this whole activist side of things, where they're actively trying to, change what's going on around them. And I think it's a great piece to this puzzle that is the independent media, man. I really appreciate your guys' organization, the outlet. Anyway, you posted one of your first articles on the Fifth Column was this amazing article about what's going on with the torture program, and we co-posted it on the anti-media as well. And basically, the main point that you were making in this article is that there's a lot of blowback that we get from the torture program that the U.S. has been carrying out since 9/11, basically. And basically, you said that more than 1,000 people are basically dead. 1,000 Americans are dead because of the torture program. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. I mean, the timeline, when the U.S. media releases stories, they get them in the order that they discover them or the order they are told to publish them. So the American people, we found out about the beheadings before we found out about the severity of the torture program. So to us, it made it seem like, well, it's okay. They're cutting people's heads off, and all we did was, pile these guys naked and make fun of them. Well, first, we did do a whole lot more than that. Second, the insurgents knew what we were doing because of escapes that happened at the prison before the American people did. And because of the way the media portrayed the series of events, they kind of leave out the fact that Nicholas Berg, the first American in Iraq beheaded, in the video, they flat out say, we're doing this because of what's happening to our people in Abu Ghraib. We're going to continue doing this. Prior to that point, with the exception of Jessica Lynch being raped, all of our prisoners were pretty well treated. They did execute one guy that was severely wounded, and most people believe that was a mercy killing. They didn't videotape it. They didn't make it a propaganda thing. They shot him twice in the back of the head. It was a very clean and quick event. And they left the body where American troops could recover it. It's a horrible event, but it's something that happens in war more often than we'd probably like to know. At the end of the day, after Abu Ghraib, after the insurgents let this bombshell out in their community, of what, that we're torturing and raping people in this prison, foreign fighters flocked to Iraq. Now, those foreign fighters were responsible, going on the estimates, between 40 and 50% of our casualties were killed by people that came to Iraq to avenge our torture program. And so it's after Abu Ghraib. And it's one of these things. It's funny because the articles like this, they're like fires. They start off real small and then they get bigger. I have never received so much, I don't want to say hate mail, but that's what it is, in response to an article before. This is something that people do not want to accept. Now, the fact is, everything's sourced, everything's there. We literally have a videotaped confession from the killer saying, this is why I'm doing it, this is why it's happening, and we're going to keep doing it. But people don't want to believe it because it's so hard to believe what Americans were doing inside that prison.
Yeah, I mean,
direction of the CIA.
It's sad that people don't want to accept it because people don't want to. They don't want to accept blowback. They don't want to understand that. Unfortunately, the people that pay taxes are kind of responsible for a lot of the stuff that's going on. And to me, it's really this hubris. This very ignorant foreign policy that the U.S. has been carrying out, like all over the world. They go around acting like they could just overthrow countries and not expect anything to come back and hurt them for it. We do have a couple callers on the line. I just want to remind everyone that calls in to keep your phone or your computer on mute until we go to you, just because we get a little bit of feedback on our end. Our first caller that was on the line is from 559. How's it going? You're on the anti-media. Did you want to ask Justin a question?
Yeah, if you can hear me, this is James Jobe out of Fresno, California, internet troller, activist, whatever you'd like to call me.
Yeah, we could hear you. How's it going? What do you want to talk about?
Excellent. I actually, I'm a big anti-media fan. Love you guys, and Justin, recent friend of mine and helper in my plight in this is to my plight in this is to start with one thing at a time, where we have like I think you mentioned yourself there that the plight in this is so heavy, and there are so many different things. There are so many different aspects that need to be addressed, from anywhere from torture all the way to police brutality, all the way down to our basic human rights as people. I believe we can start with one area, one aspect. If everybody just kind of focused on one thing, and mine honestly is to end the drug war. Mine is to start with drugs, decriminalize drugs, take people out of prisons and put them out of harm's way and out of debt and out of crap because of their self-medications for themselves. And then the police can't take and put them in prison and can't come pounding on your door because they think you have drugs in there and killing you and killing your dogs and things of this nature. I just honestly think if we start smaller and drive a wedge, much like the same you'd want to pick something up heavy, you drive a wedge into it and just break it from the bottom up.
Yeah, I think you make a great point. The thing that's tough about that, really, one thing I've noticed from my, organizing and working here locally in San Diego, is that activists are like really passionate people, and they are really strongly in their beliefs, and it's kind of tough to, if someone's like, I have a lot of friends that are anti-SeaWorld activists, and they are huge on getting, on freeing Willie and freeing Shamu and all that stuff. I personally don't think that's a huge thing. I haven't been to one of those events here in San Diego because we have a SeaWorld here and they have them pretty often, but I haven't been there because I don't think it's that big of a deal. I'm much more concerned, as you are. My biggest issue, one of my biggest concerns, is the drug war, because I think it's an absolute war on freedom. And so I focus my energy on things like that: foreign policy, anti-war activism, and food activism and stuff like that. But the tough thing about activists is it's like herding cats. It'd be tough to really say, hey, everybody, let's all focus on the drug war, even though the big thing that you're concerned about is SeaWorld. But at the same time, I think if we look back at the very beginnings of the March Against Monsanto, it gives us somewhat of a blueprint as to how to go about uniting a lot of people in a nonpartisan fashion to combat a common enemy. And whether you're conservative, liberal, anarchist, libertarian, whatever, most people can agree that Monsanto is definitely a parasite on the food supply. And I think that's why that event, at least initially, was extremely successful. And now we're starting to see the repercussions of that, small awakening. And I'm glad to say the anti-media was a huge part of that at the beginning. But we're starting to see that McDonald's is having record losses. We're starting to see Monsanto's revenue drop 34%. We're starting to see a bunch of farmers markets popping up everywhere and people starting to make healthier food choices. And I think that's a huge thing. I think that's a huge anti-statist thing. And that's why I'm so big on the food movement and food freedom and all of these type of things, because I think that, the way that they keep us, in certain ways, the way they keep us in line is through the medical system. And if they have a lot of people sick, well, then that's a lot of people that rely on the medical system. And so that's less people that are able to stand up and start being activists or thinking for themselves or various different things. If you're stuck in the medical system and you're always sick, well, then you're never going to really be able to do much else, and that's why I think food freedom is so important, because it really has to do with our health, and if people were to eat healthy food, stop eating McDonald's, we're starting to see those trends start to happen, then we're going to start seeing people that are a lot healthier.
It's insidious
I completely
consolidation.
agree, honestly.
I was just going to say it's insidious consolidation of the things we all have to survive, Nick. That's what spraying in the air is. That's what fluoride in the water is. Eventually, if you can't pay to be healthy, you just get sick and you die.
Yeah, that's very true. That everything has been commoditized, so that you have to wonder why Nestle just got sold a whole bunch of trillions or billions or some odd gallons of water for $2.25. Water. Yeah, water. Like just here in California, we need water so bad. It's beautiful outside, but we need water so bad, and everything is commoditized. Everything in every single way, even our basic needs, our basic human needs, we need every single day.
Yeah,
How is this possible?
I definitely agree, man. And I saw a report the other day from NASA that said Southern California, the Southwest of the United States, is heading for a 1,000-year drought possibly, and that's a pretty scary prospect. And to me, that just tells us, hey, we got to worry about our water security, our food security, and all that stuff, because right now
Everything.
right now, I don't know if you're aware of like the California politics, but they're always in this constant battle with other states to get rights to the Colorado River water, and it's a political process. And if how many million, 40 million Californians are reliant on a political process to secure their water, that's a pretty scary prospect. I think. Yeah, I mean, we need to bring all that stuff back into the hands of the communities and stuff. And
with laws and legislature in effect that stop us from being able to even collect rainwater. So we can't collect rainwater in these drought-ridden towns. So if we do get an actual rain and we're caught collecting rainwater for our plants, for our lawns, for our water, we are then fined by our government.
Yeah, and
very interesting paradox.
So it's to me, I think it's going to be hard to get everyone to unite around one cause. I think what is more possible is kind of an open source revolution where we're just putting ideas out there and people can just implement them in their own lives and all that stuff. Because it's tough to get a lot of people together and get them all to agree on certain things, and that's I think the whole beauty of freedom. Is that we don't all have to agree. But I think people need to learn how to respect other people's decisions when it comes to their freedom, and everyone has their own version of how they want to be free, So I guess that's maybe a way that we can go as far as getting more people on board with certain ideas. But I think it's possible. But the other thing that we have to keep in mind is that when it comes to movements, when it comes to creating change, we have to keep in mind our messaging and make sure that our messaging isn't polarizing or dividing. We have to have very unifying messages. Like, for instance, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Common Ground movement, but they basically embody what I'm talking about. Everyone should look them up. And they were also the ones talking about a tax strike. And I want to go back to Justin here because when we were talking earlier about police brutality, you mentioned defunding. And that is one of the ideas that the Common Ground movement guys, I think it was Will Brown, he was on the show a month or two ago, talked about, is he's talking about setting up in maybe a 5-year timeline, a general tax strike, a big tax strike to try to defund a lot of the stuff that's going on. And we were talking about torture before we took the caller. And I was just thinking that, we can defund the entire system if we're effective enough. What do you think about that, Justin?
I think it's possible. I think there'd be a lot of unintended side effects to that. One of them being that our system, as broke as it is, and it is broken, and it is in need of replacement. I don't even want to say repair, but at the current moment, a lot of people depend on it beyond what we would want to be targeted. And I think we would run into issues. I think if he's going to do that, and Will is definitely a guy that can put this together, we would have to make sure that he focuses on, stuff like, local food banks and stuff like that. They would be impacted by this too. So, there's a lot of stuff that has to go into place. I think it's a brilliant idea. And I think 5 years is probably how long it would take to put all the ducks in a row to get it put together. But there's a lot of small things that we don't really think about our tax dollars going to that would be heavily impacted. And at the same time, not to be a complete cynic, but if people are hurting for those needs, they are going to be more angry with the government. It's a very cynical viewpoint, but it's true. I mean, historically speaking, when you cut off food, people get pretty mad, and it would be an unintended side effect of what he's wanting to do. So if it was possible to take that, which is basically the government uses that in a way to buy a lot of votes and to buy a lot of compliance. If he was able to take that out of the hands of the government and give it back to the people, where the people were feeding each other, I think it would be very easy. It'd be an easy jump for people to realize we don't need as much government as we have.
Yeah, and one of the things that I thought about is that when there was that government shutdown back in 2014, 2013, end of 2013, whatever it was, that fake government shutdown. Obama went on TV, gave a press conference, and he basically said, "Hey, I can't guarantee that people are going to get their Social Security checks." And so that's one thing to keep in mind, is that the scare tactics are going to be insane. And one easy example is what happened in Scotland with the Indie Ref and how the media piled on against that with all those scare tactics. And they were even saying, oh, well, if Scotland secedes from the UK, they're going to get hit with terrorist attacks and stuff. So the scare tactics are definitely going to be there, and it's going to be the tax. If a tax strike is able to get put together, it will be demonized.
Yeah.
Look at the Tea Party, Nick, and look at the actual Boston Tea Party.
Yeah, I mean, the Tea Party, it definitely was one of those things that got co-opted like so quickly, But yeah, the Boston Tea Party was a huge moment, and we talked about it earlier with the Boston Massacre as well, and these turn point moments. But I think we're working towards that point, and it's kind of a scary prospect. But I do think a tax strike is something that, because everybody's got a different reason why they want a tax strike. I mean, if you don't like the way that the war is going, you can tax strike. If you don't like any function of the government, you can go on a tax strike. So it is a idea that I think a lot of people could probably get behind. Now, we are joined on the line by Baron Hines from whatthefreally.com, and he's also a member of the anti-media team. How's it going, Baron? Did you want to add on to anything that Justin was saying?
I'll say this much. It was definitely interesting to listen, because I think that this is really where we always get to when we talk about what needs to happen to help people care for themselves and change this paradigm. I'll say this much. What I heard, and I pulled it up while I was listening, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And this is what's really preventing things from progressing the way that activists would want to see in their own mind. So if you think about the hierarchy of needs, you got physiological needs, which are your air, food, water, etc. I think what Justin was mentioning, which he's exactly right. That's what they're attacking first. They're attacking the air, they're attacking the water, they're attacking the food. Because if you can't live, then if you can't live strong, then you're not going to be of use to anyone. And at this point, we're not going to stop the 1,000-year drought in the West. We're not going to stop chemtrails. We're not going to stop certain things that, we could name them all day. What we can do is take back your hierarchy of needs. You take back your air freedom, your water freedom, and your food freedom. So people are already kind of taking back food freedom, right? With all the organic buying going on. There's 100 ways to do it, but just listening, we need to move past the theoretical block. as activists, we all have this understanding in our mind that, yes, like you said, it's like herding cats, and we're not going to move past everyone's individual activist grind. So, but we need that activist focusing on SeaWorld. And, bottom line, just to make that point, like, there's a middle ground. And, a lot of people, not necessarily on this show, are but there's a lot of people out there that are confused in that sense. And what I'm looking at is, if you want to change this, you need that SeaWorld activist to essentially make a play, because you can't expect to say something and to have it change. You have to make it change. So you have to be the one looking at the situation at SeaWorld and say, okay, there's only 5 people at my protest, or there's 20 people at my protest. I have to do something better next time. I have to do something that's more meaningful, that's more comprehensive. And I have to put it in people's face so that, I think Justin was saying, all these revolutionary things, when you see it, when it's in front of you, it makes sense. It makes sense that you want to eat better food and so on. So you have to convey that to that person to make sense. And you have to, in that point, convey it to the masses. And that's where we get into the problem of media exposure and propaganda. But, you look at all these websites that are popping up that you were talking about before, that's part of it. But the next phase is we have to target specific things. So we have to stop tilting at problems that we can't fix and give people the solutions to get around it. So like I said, in the case of food and water, you have to have do-it-yourself solutions, things at home that that your activists can take and give to their followers and say, hey, you should try this. But you look, it's already happening with the food revolution, with the health revolution. I was sitting here talking to someone about coconut oil and how it became a trend 5-6 years later, after it really started spreading in alternative media. These are the things and the ways that we have to change that. And there's a point coming where people are going to start to stand up for themselves, where they're going to get tired of getting pushed around. I mean, people are already pissed off. They've already got road rage. Activists are literally at their wits' end. I see people on Facebook, that you check in on people's status posts and things like that. You can understand and you can feel the frustration in people that have been paying attention for years now and understanding what's going on, and they're frustrated to the point where they don't necessarily know what to do next.
Yeah, exactly. I think you're definitely onto something there. I think agorism is the next step. Is putting ideas into motion that are actually working, that are actually doing something, that are actually giving us an alternative to what it is that we're experiencing. I do have a caller on the line, and I can't take any more callers because we're getting too close to the end of the show. I'm sorry. Someone else was calling in. I couldn't take the call. We do have one more caller from 718 area code. If you're still on the line, how's it going? You're on the Anti-Media. What do you want to talk about?
Hey, what's happening?
Nothing much.
No, I'm just listening. I just tuned in and just listening to what you guys are saying and see exactly where you guys are heading. That's all.
Oh, cool.
Not much to be said right now, but I do agree with the last gentleman that spoke. I think we have to be a little bit more realistic in terms of where we are in positioning ourselves. There has to be concrete steps. Right now, I think you have to look at this movement and everything that's happening. You have to understand the phase. And if we understand the phase, then we can understand the next one. That's all I'd say for now, anyway.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for tuning in, and thanks for speaking with us. And make sure you tune in. Anyone else on the call can feel free to stick on the line. We're going to jump into some foreign policy stuff here. And anybody that wants to interject, feel free. But we got this crazy scenario going on over in the Middle East, of course. And the latest news is that I think it was 21 Coptic Christians are beheaded in Libya by ISIS. So basically, they're telling us that ISIS is now in Libya. And Obama just put forth that authorization for force that said we can bomb any country that ISIS is in. So that tells us that we're probably going to start bombing Libya once again, because don't forget, we recently overthrew the government of Libya and killed Gaddafi. But that's probably going to happen again, and of course, after Iraq, after we took out Saddam Hussein, ISIS has kind of grown out of his shadow. And is it just me, or are we starting to see a pattern here? What do you think, Braun?
Well, not even a pattern. We know the playbook at this point. And I mean, Libya, we how long have we been watching Libya, since they took out Gaddafi? 2.5 years now. And at this point, all last year while Syria and Ukraine was going on and Ebola and everything else, Libya was really one of the most important places out there. It was literally in a state of open warfare, civil warfare, and proxy warfare at this point. But, what they've done was they got a bunch, same thing we're doing in Syria. They got a bunch of gangs together, handed them weapons, and they said, here, we'll get behind you while you press Gaddafi. And now they, so then they go in and they kill the ambassador, Ambassador Stevens in Benghazi. And after that, the whole situation turned into a propaganda free-for-all. And when you notice, as far as people pressed Benghazi for the truth, they stopped talking about it, because it even came out in CNN that they were lying about Benghazi, about the official story, the people that were surviving and all that stuff. It came out and then it disappeared. And, once a week I see videos online, that are worse than Syria. People talk about the beheadings, the things that they're doing to Libyan citizens are unspeakable at this point. And, right now Libya is basically in the middle of the two most prominent sides are basically, they both have links to CIA and State Department funding and backing and foreign fighters everywhere. It's really one of those laughable things that we joke about. The next thing you'll hear about is ISIS is in Libya, and here we are.
Yeah, exactly. And it seems kind of coincidental that it comes on the heels of Obama's announcement, and it's really unfortunate, because what we're going to see, I mean, there's news today that Egypt is already bombing in Libya, and that's Egypt, but they're bombing with American planes and American bombs. Anyway, it's only a matter of time until the U.S. is bombing again in Libya as well.
And at this point, there's so many theaters open that it almost doesn't matter. Like they try out whichever theater and explanation is most useful on that day. Like you look at Yemen, there's been very little said about Yemen, and they just had a coup last week. Literally, rebels surrounded the president's palace, surrender, and then the U.S. last week on Thursday or Friday, they closed their embassy and all the Marines left. And you put a story on Anti-Media about how the Marines turned their weapons over before they flew out of the country. And there's a blip about it on CNN or Fox or whichever is your propaganda choice.
Which is insane, because that's a coup d'etat.
Yeah, I think Justin was going to say something. Go ahead, man. We're almost at the end of the show.
The Egyptians have a very, very... I think that the beheadings, however you believe they occurred, we can all agree that it was exploited by the U.S. government, but I think that it was underestimated, the relationship that the Egyptians have with the Christians. They're kind of a national treasure, even though it's an Islamic country, and they treat them really poorly. They're not going to let anybody else treat them poorly. I don't think the Egyptians are going to stop with a few airstrikes. They've already made overtures through Jordan, and Hezbollah is now going to fight with us in Iraq. It's insane.
That's the end of the show. Thanks for calling in, guys. Catch you Wednesday.
Have a good night, guys.
I'ma let them know through the stereo. Yo, here we go through the stereo. stereo, stereo.